What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to do another full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of different videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be about Excalibur, the early days of Alan Davis' run on the actual team. You see, when it came to Alan Davis, he worked alongside with Chris Claremont as the artist when Excalibur first kicked off in 1989. Now, he did leave for a short period of time, but he came right back as writer and artist for the actual book. And really, he had a very first interesting story arc where he had introduced the idea of the Anti-Phoenix and also bringing in new characters who were going to be used in later books down the road by other writers like Kai Lun, and also Necrom, a very interesting character as a bad guy. So yes, this is the early days of Excalibur, written and drawn by Alan Davis, the whole Anti-Phoenix story arc. I do hope you enjoy. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we have to jump back over to Excalibur, but now we are going to begin our coverage over Alan Davis' run on Excalibur. Now, technically, he was part of the early days of Excalibur when Chris Claremont was the one writing the books, but now Alan Davis is going to be the writer of the books as we go through our coverage over X-Men comics from this point going forward. Now, with that being said, when it comes to Alan Davis, I have to say I love the idea that he does bring back some old concepts we saw in the earlier parts of Excalibur when Chris Claremont was writing the books. And you'll see what I mean as we go through today's video. And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we actually pick up with the TechNet group. Now, we have talked about this group before in the early days of Excalibur. They are a group of mercenaries who was working for Oppo Luna Saturni. Now remember, Oppo Luna is basically the guardian of the Omniverse. She has to make sure that everything goes okay across the Omniverse. Now, with that being said, they were hired by her to go capture the Phoenix, Rachel Summers, back in the early days of Excalibur. But the problem was, they failed. And so because they did fail, they were stuck on the main Marvel universe. Now, for this mercenary group, they believe if they are able to get rid of Rachel, then most likely they'll be allowed to finally leave this reality. And so we do pick up with the group of TechNet, and that will be Gatecrasher. Now, when it comes to Gatecrasher, she has a new plan that could most likely get rid of Excalibur, especially the Phoenix, and finally finish the job. Now, getting back over to our heroes, we do see our heroes currently getting back to the lighthouse. Now, we do learn that they have just handled a big time situation back in the city. And so our heroes are kind of exhausted, but at the same time, they're very upset about what they're hearing on the radio. You see, our heroes are getting a lot of praise for what they had did, but for our heroes, they weren't the only ones out there handling that situation. You see, there were also first responders as well who deserve to get praise as well. Either way, you didn't have Megan say, you know what, let me go ahead and make everybody breakfast. Except when she goes to grab an egg, the egg actually bounces out of the pan onto the table, and then it hatches into this very cute but very strange character, better known as Pooh-Pah 2, and I really hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, Pooh-Pah 2 is telling Excalibur that they are here to, well, deliver doom to our team. Now, right when it seems like we're about to learn what this character can actually do, you have Nightcrawler realize that a small little chick is actually a bomb. And then boom, there goes the lighthouse. Now we do learn that TechNet was actually outside watching to see what would happen to Excalibur. Now at first, they do believe that our heroes had possibly died in the explosion. Except when you do have TechNet go over there to make sure our heroes are actually dead, they do find out that, well, our heroes did not die. That matter of fact, our heroes survived, just barely. Thankfully to Rachel Summers. Now at first, it's only Kitty Pryde who's awake right now and trying her best to fight against TechNet. But you did have more and more members of Excalibur being able to jump into the battle. The problem is that our heroes were caught off guard, and so unfortunately they don't really have a fair chance in this battle. And it does look like at first our heroes are going to lose until the entire TechNet group is frozen in place. And we do learn who was able to actually freeze TechNet in place. You see, two characters do appear out of nowhere, and that would be Horatio Cringebottom, and honestly, I love that name a lot. It's a pretty funny name. But also another character known as Bert. Now these two characters, they actually work for Opal Luna Saturnine, and they came here to examine Widget. Now we had talked about that character before. You see, when it comes to Widget, it has the ability to open up portals into other realities. And really, thanks to Widget, in the early days of Excalibur, our heroes went on an adventure across Marvel's multiverse, being able to see different kinds of realities. And again, thanks to Widget. But the problem is no one knows its actual origin. And so Bert is here to actually examine it. Now you do have our heroes realize that TechNet does not actually know that Rachel Summers is no longer wanted by Opal Luna Saturnine, that technically those two characters are now on good terms with one another. And so they're kind of wondering, how in the world are they going to tell TechNet, like, hey, the contract you still believe is out there for me no longer exists? Now, getting back over to the origin of Widget, we do learn that technically his insides are just made up of, well, goop. Let me explain. So once you have Bert being able to open up Widget, he does see a pile of trash just inside Widget. And it does seem like that pile of trash actually does make up the inside of Widget. Now, here's the thing though. He also finds this energy matrix, but the problem is no one knows where this came from or how it actually works, or technically what kind of energy matrix it is. And so for everyone there, they're just more confused on the actual origin of Widget. Now you do have Bert being able to add a program to Widget to not allow him to actually travel across the multiverse anymore. And after doing that, you did have Horatio Cringebottom and Bert just leave. Now before they do leave, you did have Horatio and Bert hand over a small item that came from Opal Luna Saturnine to be delivered over to TechNet. And so once you have those two characters leave, well, you have Excalibur being able to hand over the item to TechNet to show them that, hey, this came from Opal Luna Saturnine. Now this item is just a hologram message from her telling TechNet that, listen, because you guys have failed so many times to capture the Phoenix, you guys are now permanently banned onto the main Marvel universe. You may not go back home to your own realities. But on top of that, the contract that was out on Rachel Summers no longer exists. Now for our heroes, they're kind of happy about the idea that Rachel is no longer going to be hunted by TechNet. But the problem is now TechNet is going to be on this planet Earth permanently. And so for our heroes, they feel like this group right here cannot be left alone at all, because if they are left alone, most likely they're going to cause problems for other people down the road. And so you have Megan and really most of Excalibur except Captain Britain say, you know what? we should watch them. And so they allowed TechNet to move into the lighthouse. Now, we also see a small kind of moment here where Nightcrawler and Megan are somewhat flirting with one another. And really, that is going to be very important for the next chapter. But now we have to jump over to another reality where we actually pick up on another Earth, Earth 148. Now, this Earth, as we can see right now, it does seem like it was completely destroyed. Now, we don't know what exactly happened here just yet, but we do know one thing, that we do pick up with some character who is right now asking a group of humans to pay homage, except that floating character is then stabbed in the back by another character known as Kai Lun. Now, Kai Lun is actually going to be very important in this next story arc that we're going to talk about in this video in the next couple for Excalibur. Now, when it comes to Kai Lun, apparently he's here to help out these people to fight against a guy known as Necron. Now, when it comes to Necron, we're going to learn more about him also later on in the story arc as well. But apparently for Nylon, Necron must pay for what he did to this Earth, but also so does Excalibur as well. But as we get into Excalibur issue number 43, we actually pick up with Nightcrawler and Megan doing some kind of activity together. But as the activity goes on, well, we actually see Nightcrawler and Megan getting very close to one another to the point where they actually kiss. But then out of nowhere, at the very end of this section, we actually see Nightcrawler be grabbed by the neck. You see, we kind of find out that Nightcrawler was having a dream. And while having the dream, he was talking in his dream about what he was doing with Megan. As we all know, he was kissing her. Now, of course, Captain Britain heard what Nightcrawler was saying about his dream and got very upset by it. Now, this is another callback to the early days of Excalibur. Let me explain. So, in the early days, you had Captain Britain kind of moving away from being in a relationship with Megan and actually start dating Courtney Ross. Now, it did not actually happen for a lot of different reasons, but for Captain Britain, it did seem like he was no longer wanting to be in a relationship with Megan. And so with their kind of being somewhat single, a free agent, well, Nightcrawler moved in. And honestly, it did seem like those two characters were going to end up together as a couple. Now, of course, it did not happen. But for Captain Britain, he always felt like there was something going on between Nightcrawler and Megan. And well, now he officially knows. Now, he wants to beat down on Nightcrawler, but you have Rachel Summers being able to stop him and send both guys their separate ways. Now, Megan arrives and she has no idea the two guys who cared for her were about to fight to the death, it seemed like. To her, it was just another day. She kissed Captain Britain and goes downstairs to do other things in the lighthouse. Now, the next few pages of the book is really more of Captain Britain trying his best to find a place in the lighthouse where he is actually able to sit down and read a book. But the problem is TechNet has now moved into the lighthouse. And so with them being there and also the members of Excalibur, this guy has nowhere else to go to actually sit down and read a book quietly. Now, it does lead into the moment where he does learn they have built this advanced version of an elevator. But the problem is, when he does learn about it, he on accident stepped into the elevator and he was shot up to the top part of the lighthouse. Now, he did crash pretty hard, which did cause him kind of get a somewhat minor injury, caused him to be somewhat dazed. Because of that, though, he believes that he sees Nightcrawler and Megan kissing, and this leads into the next problem. where you have Captain Britain actually wanting to kill off Nightcrawler. Not kill him off, but beat him down to the point where the man is not going to be able to walk for most likely a couple days. But you have Nightcrawler trying his best to not fight back against Captain Britain, but really try to play defense. Now, why are the two guys going back and forth? They're doing more and more damage to the actual lighthouse. And that is a major problem right there. But either way, the battle is stopped once again by Rachel, but also because of Megan. Now, the next part is really more of Megan trying to explain to us how her powers properly work. Now, we already know when it comes to Megan, she is a shapeshifter. Yes, we got that part, but she's also an empath as well, where she is able to pick up on other people's feelings. And sometimes when she does that, it does affect her other abilities. And sometimes she has a hard time trying to work through what other people are actually feeling. And so earlier, when it came to Nightcrawler, he was falling in love with Megan, and she did pick up on that, but she thought it was more like love for a friend, not love for a woman to possibly become a girlfriend and then maybe a wife down the road. And so she's kind of like, I thought you understood that I'm still learning how my powers work. I'm still learning how to work through you people's feelings. Like, this is all new to me. And here you are right now fighting over me like I'm some kind of prize. And so you have Megan just leave. And you have both guys feel, well, guilty about what they just did. But then out of nowhere, Captain Britain is then grabbed by other Captain Britons from different realities and pulled to somewhere else. Now, I want to jump back over to that other reality, the other Earth, where we actually pick up with Kai Lun. Now, we do see Kai Lun in his army being able to save the princess, better known as Satnine. And I really hope I pronounced that name correctly. Now, for Satnine, she's the last member of the royal family of this reality of Earth. But to Nylon, he believes that technically they are now ready to go after the big enemy, better known as Necron. But like I said earlier, we have no idea who this Necron character truly is just yet. But shifting our focus back over to Brian Braddock, we do learn that he was actually taken to the home base for the Captain Britain Corps. Now, we have not really talked about this organization before, so let's go ahead and dive into this real quickly. So, the Captain Britain Corps is basically an organization in Marvel's comics where in each reality, there's supposed to be a Captain Britain in some kind of way to protect that reality they come from. But on top of that, they all come together to form the Captain Britain Corps to make sure that all realities are protected. And so for Brian Braddock, he was assigned his own reality to make sure that Earth 616 is always protected. But here's the thing though, the reason why he's brought here to the base and right now being put on trial is because this man broke the law basically on Earth 616 in London, where you are not allowed to assault people, which of course he did when he fought against Nightcrawler, when he was so upset in the idea that Nightcrawler may have feelings for his woman. And so because Captain Britain, our Captain Britain, did that, they're kind of like, hey, you broke the law in your own reality, and that is a problem. Now, out of nowhere, you do have Huntman England appear. Now, he's one of the Captain Britons, but he comes from the world where the Nazis had actually won. And we saw that reality a few times in our past few videos for Excalibur. But apparently, he is the one who's going to give the punishment for our Captain Britain. Now, getting back over to Rachel and Megan back on the main Marvel Universe Earth, we do see Megan still very upset about the idea that Nightcrawler and Captain Britain fought against each other for her, over her. But she's also upset about the idea that she has no idea where her parents went to. Now, when it comes to Megan, she does not remember everything about her past. And so for Rachel, her goal is to kind of dive into the mind of Megan to see maybe there are some clues that were left behind that could help them find where her parents had actually went to. Now, when it comes to Rachel, when she does go into the mind of Megan, well, she finds basically almost nothing. But it did trigger an old memory where you have Megan realize that maybe some old friends of hers might have an idea where her parents went to, the Scott family. Now, we're going to shift our focus onto the lighthouse, where we pick up with Alistair Stewart. Now, we had actually talked about this character before. You see, Alistair Stewart works for an organization known as WHO, Weird Happening Organization, where they go around the world to investigate weird things happening across the world. Now, for today's video, that's not really important. What is important is that when it comes to Alistair Stewart, he arrived at the lighthouse looking for Rachel. And we're going to see a good old love triangle coming back into the picture again. Let me explain. So early on in Excalibur comics, Alistair established that this man had some feelings for Rachel Summers, but Kitty Pryde had feelings for him. And so it did cause a love triangle. Now for Rachel, it did seem like she may have some feelings for Alistair, but she's not really trying to make any attempts to be with him. Now he is trying so hard to be with her. Either way, when he does arrive at the lighthouse, he is looking for Rachel, but she is not there. And he wanted to take Rachel to some kind of date idea. But again, she's not there, but Kitty is. And you have Kitty say, hey, why don't I go with you instead? And so you have Kitty and Alistair leave. But again, it continues the love triangle between these characters. Now, getting back over to the other reality, we do pick up with Kylun and Princess Satnine, where we do see them still being able to lead a rebellion against the character known as Necron. And honestly, these 2 pages is kind of more just a check-in to see that what they're doing at the moment, and we're seeing that they're doing a good job taking down Necron's army. Now, getting back over to Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, we do pick up with Rachel and also Megan visiting the Scott's family. Now, the Scott's family was actually a group of people who took Megan in, and then you had Captain Britain being able to meet her that way. Either way, when it comes to Megan, she's hoping that they might have an idea where her family could possibly be yet. But the problem is, they don't have any idea where her family could be yet. But they do hand her a pamphlet to go see a psychic, better known as Madame Zelda, who might be able to tell Megan where her parents actually are at. But now I want to jump back over to Nightcrawler. And the reason why, because you have Nightcrawler still trying to recover after getting one heck of a beatdown earlier from Captain Britain. But then he's confronted by Dave Thomas. Now, Dave Thomas is another character that we had talked about before. Dave Thomas is just a guy who's a detective in London, but he's also with another character known as Amelia Witherspoon. Now, Amelia is actually someone who has the ability to predict things before they actually happen. And she was able to predict that crimes were going to happen in a certain Scotland Yard. But the problem is, even though she was able to predict those crimes, they were unable to capture anybody there at all. And so what she wants to do is use Excalibur as a way to stop the next crime, but to also get the people who are committing the crimes. But the problem is, Excalibur is currently not here at the moment. As we saw earlier, every single member of Excalibur went their separate ways. And so right now, it's just Nightcrawler in the TechNet group. But you have Dave Thomas say, they can work, use them to hopefully figure out who in the world is committing these crimes at the Scotland Yard. Now, getting back over to Megan and Rachel, they do go see the psychic, except when they do, you have Rachel stay outside while you have Megan go inside. Now, when Megan does meet the psychic, Madame Zelda, the psychic begins to freak out, but Megan is there to talk to her to hopefully figure out where her parents could possibly be yet. Now, we're going to shift our focus onto Rachel. Because while she waits outside for Megan to come back, you have Rachel realize at a nearby store, a nearby antique store, inside there, a random dagger is just floating away. But Rachel can see that somebody is actually using some kind of ability to grab the dagger and walk away with it. Except when you have Rachel try to stop that person, she is stopped from behind by a new character known as Micromax. Yes, that is his name, Micromax, and he works for the FI6. FI6 is a secret government agency in Great Britain, and apparently they were there to also capture the person who was trying to steal that dagger. Except when it comes to Micromax here, he believed at first it was Rachel Summers, not realizing that somebody else was in the room. And so he went after her, and really, she was about to give him one heck of a beatdown, but they were stopped by fellow officers or fellow guys who work for the FI6 and say, hey, Micromax, she's right, she's innocent. She was not the one who had took the dagger. It was somebody else. Now, by the end of that conversation, Megan does come out, and Megan does inform Rachel that the psychic had basically told her that her parents might be in France. Now, I want to wrap up today's video by getting back over to Captain Britain's trial, because the trial does get a whole lot worse right here. Let me explain. So, when we do jump over to Captain Britain, we do learn that technically they're going to add on more crimes that he had apparently committed. So, for example, the idea of him working alongside with the other members of Excalibur as a team is actually a huge no-no. Now, for me personally, that makes no sense at all. And here's the reason why. Because Huntman England actually works with another version of the Excalibur team, better known as the Lightning team in his reality. But apparently, still a huge no-no. Now, there was also a time where you had Excalibur travel across the multiverse. Now, that took place back in the Cross-Time Caper story arc. And in that story arc, thanks to a small device known as Widget, who we did talk about earlier in this video, he was able to open up portals to allow our heroes to travel across the multiverse. But the thing was, they were kind of forced to do it. They were actually innocent. But for the Captain Britain Corps, that's still a huge problem. You traveled across the multiverse without any kind of permission. And then finally, he fought other members of the Captain Britain Corps at the tail end of the Cross-Time Caper. And so because of all those different things, you have the Corps say, we believe that you should be permanently benched, meaning that you should die for the crimes that you had committed. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we are going to continue our coverage over Alan Davis' run. Now, early on in his run, you had Alan Davis do a lot of groundwork to kind of lay out different things that he wanted to tackle in later books down the road. Now, of course, as we dive back into our coverage over Excalibur, we have to pick up with issue number 45, where we actually pick up with Nightcrawler and the TechNet group. Now, we had actually talked about the TechNet group before. You see, they are a group of mercenaries that come from different realities across Marvel's multiverse. Now, with that being said, they were being led by a character known as Gatecrasher. Now, when it came to TechNet, they were actually assigned to go after the Phoenix, and they got this assignment by Opal Luna Saturnine. She wanted to capture the Phoenix, but the problem was they failed to actually achieve their goal. Now, because they did fail, you had Opal Luna say, because you failed to capturing the Phoenix, you are now going to be permanently banned or permanently placed on the main Marvel Universe Earth as a punishment. You are not allowed to go back to your own realities. Now, after getting punished, you then had Excalibur allow the TechNet group to move in with them. Now, by this point in our coverage over Alan Davis' run on Excalibur, he has all the different members of Excalibur going on their own separate adventures. Now, I want to shift our focus over to Nightcrawler. And the reason why, because when it comes to Nightcrawler, he was actually left behind at the lighthouse to get a chance to heal up after getting a beatdown from Captain Britain in our last video. And really, you should check out our last video to see how in the world those two got into a battle against each other. Either way, while you have Nightcrawler at the lighthouse resting, he was confronted by Dave Thomas and Miss Witherspoon. Now, we had talked about Dave Thomas before. Dave Thomas is actually a detective in London. Now, when it comes to Witherspoon, she has the ability to predict when different crimes are going to be committed across Great Britain. Now, recently, somebody has been going around stealing different valuable items, but the problem is you have all these different groups trying to catch this one criminal, but the problem is no one has been able to actually do it. And so when it came to Dave Thomas, he came over to the lighthouse looking for Excalibur, but he only found Nightcrawler in the TechNet group. And you had Dave say, hey Nightcrawler, if your team cannot help out, then just use them, because right now Great Britain needs the help of Excalibur. And so you have Nightcrawler being able to form his own team here, better known as the Endmen. And so as we get into the early page of Excalibur issue number 45, we actually pick up with Nightcrawler and the Endmen trying to get ready to catch the criminal who has been going around stealing different valuable items. But the problem is, once again, they're a tad bit too late. They did see the item move, but the problem is they couldn't see the person who was moving the item. It seemed like he is just invisible. Now, while you have our heroes inside the building, they're then confronted by another character, and that would be Micromax. Now, we had talked about him in our last video. Micromax is a new creation at this point in Marvel Comics who works for a government agency in Great Britain known as FI6. Now, they were also trying their best to catch the criminal as well. But as you see right here, both teams had basically failed. But now you have both teams blaming each other. Now that is the moment you didn't have Dave Thomas come out to confront the leader of FI6. And that would be Inky Blot. And honestly, that name kind of sucks, but Inky Blot is the actual leader of FI6. And we do learn that him and Dave Thomas, they do have some bad blood between each other. And so we do see the two characters going back and forth when it comes to who has the right to work this case. Is it Dave Thomas or is it Inky? But now we have to jump over to Captain Britain. Now, at the end of our last video, we saw that he was arrested by the Captain Britain Corps. Now remember, the Captain Britain Corps is a group in Marvel Comics where in each reality across Marvel's multiverse, you have a Captain Britain in all those different realities. And their goal is to work together to protect Marvel's multiverse. Now, the reason why our Captain Britain was arrested at the end of our last video is because, you see, you have to follow the laws of your reality. And so when it came to our Brian Braddock, when he fought against Nightcrawler, they said you assaulted that man and you broke the law of your own world. Now they also try to add in other charges as well, but either way, at the end of the trial, they said, you know what, your punishment is death. You have to go. And so we actually see Captain Britain trying his best to protect himself, but then at the very last second, you have Opal Luna Saturnine walk in. Now, when she walks in, everyone stops. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, she was not actually in charge of Otherworld. You see, around this time, Lady Roma was the one in charge of Otherworld. And matter of fact, you had Roma give a note over to Saturnine and said, hey, listen, this whole trial is going to stop. You are going to leave that Captain Britain alone from Earth 616 because honestly, I need him for something else. But getting back over to the lighthouse, we actually pick up with Day Thomas requesting the other members of Excalibur to help out with this situation of his. But the problem is you have Nightcrawler tell him that he has no way to actually reach the other members of Excalibur, especially Captain Britain, who's not even on that reality at the moment. Now, that is the moment where you do have Witherspoon tell everyone in the room that another crime is going to be committed very soon. And so Nightcrawler and his team must get ready to stop that criminal next. But here's the problem. You see, while you have Nightcrawler talking to Day Thomas, he realized that the TechNet group, his Endmen, are actually arguing with one another. But that is the moment where he has a flashback to his early days of being an X-Men, where he would also argue with his teammates as well. And now he understands what Charles Xavier went through back in those days when Charles first put that team together. But now we can have a proper conversation about Otherworld. Now, we had talked about Otherworld in our other videos over the X-Men when it came to Dawn of X, Reign of X, and Fall of X. When it comes to Otherworld, it's kind of like this dimension at the very center of Marvel's multiverse, where it is actually connected to all realities across Marvel's multiverse. Now, with that being said, we also learned a tad bit about the powers of Captain Britain as well. You see, we had learned early on in our coverage over Excalibur is that when it comes to Captain Britain, if he stays away from Great Britain for too long, he'll begin to lose his powers. And the reason why, because in Otherworld, there's a thing called the Energy Matrix. Now, the Energy Matrix has the ability to give all Captain Britons in all realities their powers. But here's the catch though. You see, when it comes to the Energy Matrix, it makes sure that power is only shared in all realities version of Great Britain. And so when it comes to Captain Britain, if he wants to use his abilities, he has to be in Great Britain. But if he tries to leave Great Britain, he'll begin to lose his abilities. Now, we're also told that his suit has the ability to kind of absorb the Energy Matrix, kind of like a backup just in case he does have to go away from Great Britain. But just like his powers, that power is also gonna go away as well. And so now we know that in the far future, if he does leave Great Britain, there is a point where he might lose his abilities until he goes back to Great Britain to recharge. But now we jump over to Megan and also Rachel Summers. Now, these two characters are currently going on an adventure to France to hopefully find the parents of Megan. Now, here's the thing. They are actually walking over to France. They're not trying to fly over there by using the powers of the Phoenix. Because remember, around this time in Marvel Comics, Rachel Summers was the Phoenix. Either way, when it comes to Rachel and Megan, they're walking to France. And Megan has no idea why in the world they're walking to France and not using the powers of the Phoenix. And you have Rachel say, listen, when we had stopped by your friend's house, I realized that when I don't use the abilities of the Phoenix, I begin the process of regaining my memories from my past. Because remember, for Rachel Summers, she comes from the Days of Future Past timeline. But when she had arrived in this timeline, she kind of forgot everything about her timeline. Not completely, but most of the different pieces of her past in that timeline. And so she's telling us that when she does turn off the powers of the Phoenix, she begins to remember everything from her past. And she kind of wants to see where that actually goes. But getting back over to Nightcrawler and his Endmen, we do see them being able to figure out who was going around stealing the different objects in Great Britain and some kind of creature. Now, you have our heroes being able to take the creature down, but then our heroes realize that this creature is actually mindless. It does not have a mind of its own. Now, you do have our heroes try their best to figure out who was trying to control the creature, trying to find the person who was controlling the creature. But the thing is, when they do find a way to contact the controller, he was able to cut the connection from the creature, so our heroes cannot find him. But then after that, the creature is then shrunk down in size into a doll. And so you then have our heroes wondering what in the world is possibly going on here. Now, in our last video, we had talked about another reality known as Earth 148. Now, that Earth was not really called Earth, it was called Eroth. But in that reality, we have met two characters, Kylun and also Princess Satnine. Now, those two characters were trying their best to lead a rebellion against another character known as Necrom. Now, Necrom is going to be very important for this video and the next one as well. But Necrom was able to take over the entire planet. And so you have Kylun and Princess here trying their best to lead a rebellion against him. But as we dive into the second chapter for this video, we do learn that Necrom was able to take over the minds of the heroes of this reality. Now, the heroes of this reality are all dead, and so they're really just mindless creatures who are servants for Necrom to fight against the rebellion. Now, you have the princess trying her best to take out Necrom, where, of course, their battle does go back and forth, and it does seem like each character might kill one another. Now, the princess, she is killed off by Necrom, and really Necrom is almost killed off by the princess, but also because of Kylun as well. And really, this is a sad moment for Kylun. Something else I forgot to mention is that Kylun was actually very close to the princess, and we're going to learn more about that kind of relationship down the road. But either way, for Kylun, he does chase after Necrom, who is trying to get away after being severely injured thanks to the princess. Except when it comes to Kylun, he sees Necrom go through a door and he follows Necrom through that door. And he was able to be teleported back into the main Marvel universe. Except when he walks through the door, well, he arrived in the bathroom of the lighthouse, the home for Excalibur, where Nightcrawler was just trying to brush his teeth after taking a shower. And so you have Nightcrawler trying his best to survive, but then you have Kylun realize that Nightcrawler is speaking English, and so he stops to attack Nightcrawler and realize that he's from this reality, that he's finally back home. But now we can shift our focus over to Rachel Summers and Megan, who are still on their way over to France, but they do find a random mansion on top of a hill. A creepy mansion, or a creepy castle to be more exact. Either way, they're then confronted by Dracula and Frankenstein. Now, you already know that this is not Dracula, because if he does pop up, you already know things are about to get a whole lot worse. And so this is not the real Dracula, but at first you have our heroes believe it could be the real one. And really, you have Dracula being able to tell Megan to show her true form. Now, her true form is apparently the Goblin Princess form, and we saw this form all the way back in X-Men Inferno when she became the Goblin Princess because all of New York was being affected by the Inferno event. Now, that was a long time ago for Excalibur, but this is Alan Davis doing another callback when he had worked with Chris Claremont in the early days of Excalibur. Now, you have Rachel realize that something is off about Dracula and Frankenstein, where she is able to knock both of them out just like that. and they changed back into regular people. And so it seemed like they were able to play some kind of illusion game on our heroes. But then you have Megan realize there's someone else nearby, and that is when she finds a creature that looks somewhat similar to Megan's other form. Now, we jump back over to Nightcrawler at the lighthouse, where we're able to learn more about Kai Lun. Now, Kai Lun actually first appeared back in Excalibur number 2. So let me explain. So back in Excalibur number 2, there was a young boy known as Colin McKay. Now, Colin McKay was a young boy on the run trying to get away from a crime lord known as Vixen, another character we talked about in the early days of Chris Claremont's run on Excalibur. Either way, while on the run, he found Widget. Now, as we all know, Widget has the ability to open up portals to allow people to travel into other realities. And so when Colin found Widget, he was teleported into another reality, Earth 148, or the Earth better known as Eroth. Now, he first arrived there, he was able to meet the princess and the rest of the royal family. And at first, they loved the guy because to them, him appearing was kind of like a good omen, meaning that good things were going to come down the road for the planet. And he was actually able to marry the princess. But the problem was, right after they got married, well, that was when Necrom attacked the planet, destroying the entire world. And so, as we all know, he then led a rebellion to get rid of Necrom, but he chased Necrom back over into this reality. And something else I do want to mention is that Kai Lun is actually a mutant. So when he grew up, his actual mutation kicked in, where he did turn into this kind of werewolf looking character. Now, things does get a tad bit crazier when it comes to the whole idea of Kai Lun arriving back into this reality. You see, he left this reality when he was a young boy, and so many years have passed by. But except while many years passed by on Earth 148, only 1 year passed in the main Marvel universe. Now, for Nightcrawler, he also tells Kai Lun that when it comes to Necrom, he's been here for a few months. And so apparently when Necrom went through the door first before Kai Lun did, he was already on Earth for 6 months, even though it was just mere seconds that Kai Lun followed Necrom through the door. That mere seconds led to months between him arriving into the main Marvel universe. Either way, you have Nightcrawler agree to help him find Necrom and bring him down. But getting back over to Megan and also Rachel Summers, we do learn that the creature they found is called a Nuri. Now, a Nuri is a race of creatures that have the ability to use magic. Now, many years ago, and I'm talking about many years ago, they had left this reality to go into another dimension. But every once in a while, they would come back to the Earth to see how things had changed. Now, when it came to this Nuri, when it came back, it found a group of people in trouble in the middle of the blizzard, and he was able to use his magic as a way to save those people. The problem was, after doing that, they enslaved him and made him use his magic as a way to make them more gold and other kind of stuff to help please them. And those two guys we saw earlier belonged to the same family that had been enslaving him this entire time. Now, this Nuri is also able to show Megan and Rachel a different plane of reality, better known as, and I know I am going to mispronounce this, but better called the Alashara, and I really hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, the Alashara is a different plane where you are allowed to see life energy. And so when it comes to Megan, she looks beautiful on this plane right here. Now, Megan, she does look somewhat cute, but Megan's true form looks beautiful. Now, you have the Nuri tell Megan that there is probably a good reason why these two characters had met. But either way, this Nuri has to move on. It is dying after being here so long as a slave. And so you have Rachel and Megan say goodbye to this creature. But getting back over to the lighthouse, we do see that some things are happening in the lighthouse. So for example, you have Kai Lun and Nightcrawler realize that, well, Widget is now beginning to grow a body. But things get even crazier because then out of nowhere, there's a loud boom sound. And when you have our heroes turn around, they're now confronted by a different kind of creature. But as we get into the final chapter for today's video, we do learn what this creature is. As a matter of fact, it's an alien from the Shi'ar Empire. Now remember, the Shi'ar Empire is technically an empire that rules over many planets in the universe, but each planet is its own particular race. And so when it comes to the Shi'ar Empire, it's made up of many races. And so we do learn that this creature is actually wearing an armor suit, and she takes it off, and we learn that her name is Cerise. Now this is Alan Davis beginning the process of adding in new members to the Excalibur team like Kai Lun and also Cerise. Now when it comes to her character, we're going to learn more about her character down the road in later books. Now, I want to jump back over to R. Brian Braddock, and here's the reason why. So, when it comes to R. Brian, he's still in Otherworld, but he's then confronted by another Captain Britain. Now, this other Captain Britain does inform Brian that when it comes to Excalibur, they were actually put together by Lady Roma, that she made sure that those 5 heroes would come together to form the superhero team. Now, we don't know why, but for Brian, he begins to think back to all the different events that had actually led the team coming together for the first time back in Excalibur #1 because of Lady Roma. She wanted to make sure this team came together. Now, this other Captain Britain, he does inform Brian that when it came to Roma, she made sure to add a small twist to Captain Britain, our Captain Britain, by saying that he would always try to work alongside with the other heroes on Excalibur to make sure the team actually came together. And even if he tried to move away from the team, he would always get pulled back in some kind of way. And so now he realized that Excalibur did not come together in its own organic way. It came together because of Lady Roma. And now Brian wants to know, why in the world did she put this team together for? Now, I want to jump back over to Nightcrawler, and here's the reason why. So you have Nightcrawler being able to hear the story of Cerise, to learn where she's actually from. Now, like I said earlier, she is from the Shi'ar Empire, but she's from a world from the Shi'ar Empire called Shasko Frukanon, and I really hope I pronounced that whole thing correctly. If not, please forgive me. But she does tell us that she got tired of how society ran on her home world, and so she was trying to use a wormhole to leave her planet, to go to a different planet. But then out of nowhere, she was dragged over here to Earth. Now, while she's telling that story to Nightcrawler, well, you didn't have Widget being able to open up another portal to allow more people from a different reality to come into the main Marvel universe. But I want to jump back over to Captain Britain. And the reason why, because you have Captain Britain, our Captain Britain, being able to meet up with Lady Roma. Now, he wants to know, why in the world was Excalibur put together for? Now, she does tell him that the reason why they were put together was to fight against evil. But the problem is, she has no idea what kind of evil. Now, she also tells us that her father has started something, and it's up to her to actually finish it. Now, for Captain Britain, he does inform Lady Roma that the Excalibur team did have a run-in with Merlin, her father, a while back. And we had actually skipped over that story. Just know that our heroes did run into Merlin, but for Roma, she can't believe they did, because to her, he's no longer around. And so once she's able to access the mind of Captain Britain, that is when she realized that he is telling the truth, that Merlin is up to something. He's becoming very direct. But the question is right now, what is he actually up to? Now, this is where you have Alan Davis begin to wrap up some loose ends so that we are able to move into the next story arc. So let me explain. So when it comes to Alan Davis, he does inform us that the TechNet group is going to leave. You see, the other people that Widget had brought into this reality had made a deal with TechNet. They now have a new contract, and so now they're going to leave to finish that contract. And so there goes TechNet. They're now out of the picture. Now, after they leave, you have all members of Excalibur come back except for Kitty Pryde. Now, for Nightcrawler, he does explain things to Rachel, Megan, and Brian about what happened recently at the Lighthouse, and also how Excalibur now has new members to their team, Cerise and also Kai Lund. Now the question is right now, where is Kitty Pryde? And you have Nightcrawler say, oh, well, she's in Ireland with Alistair. And let's not forget, that happened in our last video because Alistair was looking for Rachel. He is so madly in love with her, but unfortunately, she was not around. She was with Megan. And so Kitty Pryde, who also has a crush on Alistair, took Rachel's place. And currently, they're in Ireland. And to wrap up today's video, we do pick up with Kitty Pryde and also Alistair. And we see them with a team of people currently at some dig site. And their goal is to dig up some kind of chamber that they had found. Except you have Kitty Pryde scan the chamber. And that is when she realized there's somebody inside there. And this Okay, so getting back into our coverage over Alan Davis' run on Excalibur as we continue our coverage over the X-Men, we actually pick up with issue number 48 as the first chapter for today's video. Now, this is going to be Alan Davis bringing in a very interesting concept, the idea of the opposite of the Phoenix, the anti-Phoenix. And you'll see what I mean as we go through today's video. But getting into the opening pages of today's video, we actually pick up with a new character known as Ferran. Now, Ferran is going to be really important for this story arc alone and really other story arcs down the road. But when it comes to Ferran, apparently he is destined to go to battle against the anti-Phoenix. And so this is Alan Davis bringing in a new concept in the world of Marvel Comics, the opposite of the Phoenix. Now, apparently, once he is able to actually defeat the anti-Phoenix, he's now supposed to become the host of the actual Phoenix. Now, let's not forget, the current host of the Phoenix is actually Rachel Summers. And so now we're kind of left to believe in the possibility that she may lose the powers of the Phoenix. But now we can shift our focus over to Excalibur. Now, when it comes to our heroes, let's not forget, at the end of our last video, Kitty Pryde and Alistair Stewart were at a dig site, and apparently they had found some kind of chamber. And the problem was they had no way to actually reach the chamber. And so as we dive into today's video, we do see the rest of Excalibur arriving to kind of find a way into the actual chamber. Now their main goal is to use the powers of Kitty Pryde to phase through the ground to hopefully reach the actual chamber, and use the power of the Phoenix to hopefully guide Kitty Pryde into the right direction. But this is going to lead into some major problems. You see, once you have the two ladies being able to get inside the chamber, reality changed around them, and really around Rachel, because as soon as they get inside the chamber, Kitty Pryde collapsed. Now you do have Rachel try to wake her back up, except Kitty Pryde seems to be dead. And then you have Rachel realize that she's no longer in the main Marvel universe, that instead she's now in the Days of Future Past universe. Because remember, that's the timeline that she came from. She only came to the past to hopefully change the future. But unfortunately, that future has now broke away into its own timeline. Either way, she now believes that she's back in her timeline, and she's kind of freaking out. But then reality changes again around her to the point where she's now at the Hellfire Club, at the point in time where she had almost killed off Selene, but she was stopped by Wolverine. Except this time, at this moment, it's Wolverine telling her, no, go ahead, kill that person off. What is stopping you? Now, Rachel remembers that moment that Wolverine was able to stop her to actually help her from not becoming a true killer. But you have Rachel realize that this is all wrong, that for some strange reason, reality is changing around her. And that is the moment where but then she's confronted by a random character. Now, this character at first tells Rachel that he was trying to test her to see if she was an evil person, but realized that no, she's good, but her mind is just too fragile. And so because of that, she cannot hold on to the powers of the Phoenix. But he also says that he is the rightful host of the Phoenix. So go ahead and hand that power over to him. Now, Rachel remembers what Brian told her. It really is a callback to our last video. You see, when it came to Brian Braddock, he learned that Excalibur actually came together to fight against a person down the road, a powerful foe. The problem is they have no idea who that foe could possibly be. But either way, when it came to Merlin and Lady Roma, they went out of their way to set up different events to make sure that Excalibur actually came together. And so for Rachel, she believes this powerful character right now could be that person they're supposed to stop together. Now, for the rest of Excalibur, they're freaking out because they have not heard back from Kitty Pryde nor Rachel Summers. And so now they're trying to use their different abilities as a way to dig their way down to the actual chamber. Except when they are able to make a hole to the chamber, well, the Anti-Phoenix is able to escape out into the open. Now, as soon as it does that, Furon appears, and when he does appear, well, it now begins the battle between him and the Anti-Phoenix. And let's not forget that he told us that he was supposed to defeat the Anti-Phoenix, but also be able to become the host of the actual Phoenix. Either way, their battle does begin. But while you have our heroes trying to jump in and help out Furon, well, unfortunately, they're then confronted by creatures that had just popped out of the ground. Now, our heroes are unable to do any kind of damage to these creatures at all until Kylon was able to jump in and actually help them. Now, when it comes to Kylon, he does recognize the type of magic that was actually used to bring these creatures to life. Now, for Kylon, we have to remember that even though he is from this earth, when he was a young boy, he was on accident teleported over to another reality, better known as Earth 148. Now, in that reality, he was able to be married to a princess, but the problem was the world was taken over by a character known as Necrom. And in that reality, he fought Necrom for many years and learned all the different kind of magic that he uses over there. Now, Necrom was able to escape into the main Marvel universe. And so you had Kylon follow him into this reality. And so that explains how he was able to recognize the type of magic that was used to bring those creatures to life. But after that, you have our heroes being able to regroup. Now, you do have Furon get very upset with Excalibur because it does seem like they're more concerned with Necrom rather than the Anti-Phoenix. And really because most of the team was not in the chamber alongside with Rachel Summers once she had learned that it was the Anti-Phoenix. And so once she was able to catch them up, they realized that their main focus may have to be right now the Anti-Phoenix. Now, when it comes to Furon, he does get very upset with Rachel Summers. And here's the reason why. Because again, he was supposed to be the host of the Phoenix. He believes that he is the rightful host. But the problem is, she's the host right now, and he cannot believe that she was chosen by the Phoenix to be the host. Either way, you have Ferran kind of join Excalibur to hopefully find the anti-Phoenix, and you have Rachel say, let's go back to the lighthouse to find a way to actually track it. And so you have Excalibur on the way home to their lighthouse. Now, on the way home, we do learn a little bit more about Kylun and what is his mutant ability. And we do learn that he is able to reproduce any sound that he had heard. Now, for him, that is a very useless power out in the field. But you have Captain Britain say, actually, you are a very skilled fighter, and those skills do cover up your weakness. And so listen, you're not really useless. You're actually a good person to have along with the rest of the team. Now, when the heroes arrive at the lighthouse, they see all these different robotic bodies outside the lighthouse. And this is a callback to the tail end of our last video, where we saw Widget being able to make his own kind of body. For many books, he was just a head. But then at the end of our last video, he began to create a body for himself. Now, when our heroes land into the lighthouse, they realize that he had made many bodies for himself. But as they get deeper and deeper into the cave that's underneath the lighthouse, they see more and more advanced bodies that was made by Widget. And then they find him in the most advanced body out of all of them, except right when they do find Widget, you have Rachel freeze in place. And the reason why, because, well, the anti-Phoenix had found Necrom. Now, we're going to learn a whole lot more about the history of the anti-Phoenix and Necrom at a later chapter in this video. But we do see the anti-Phoenix be absorbed by Necrom. And with that happening, Rachel realized that sooner or later Necrom is going to come after her to actually absorb the power of the Phoenix. And so now our heroes must get ready to go to war against Necrom. But as we dive into Excalibur issue number 49, we do pick up with FI6. Now, FI6 is a government agency that we had talked about in our last video. Now, here's a catch though. This is going to be the last time ever in Marvel Comics, and here is the reason why. So they had detected the powers of Necrom, and they're kind of like, hey, you know what? We found him, and currently he's in some kind of abandoned warehouse. Hopefully we can move in and get him before things go crazy. The problem is, as soon as their soldiers go inside the actual warehouse, things do get crazy, because you have Necrom being able to kill off all their soldiers in a matter of seconds, and their second team outside the building were also killed off in a matter of seconds. It really shows how powerful Necrom has truly become. Now, when it comes to their leader, Inky, he's also killed off as well. That's why I said this is going to be the end of FI6. Now, they do have a mutant on their team, and that would be Micromax. And when it comes to Micromax, he has the ability to change his size, to get big or get small. But the problem is, he does not stand a chance going up against Necrom. And really, at first, we're left to believe that Necrom is going to kill him, but Micromax was able to get away just barely. But you didn't have Necrom say, you know what, fine, I'm done with all these people. It's now time for me to find the Phoenix. But getting back over to our heroes, they know that Necrom is coming. And really, you have Rachel inform everybody what he just did to FI6. And so our heroes are very concerned about Necrom. But you have Ferran get very upset with Rachel, because he kind of blames her for releasing the anti-Phoenix that had just fused with Necrom. But you have everyone say, hey, she had no idea what she was doing. Get off her back. Now, in the middle of their argument, out of nowhere, you then have Kang appear. But this is a Kang from a different reality. And really, you have Excalibur from that reality also appear as well, fighting against Kang. But then they disappear just like that. Now for Kylun, he's kind of like, that was pretty wild. But you have our heroes tell him like, hey, those kind of things happen a lot around the lighthouse. you just gotta get used to it. Either way, you didn't have our heroes move on because now they have to get ready for Necrom. And so while you have half the team go inside the lighthouse to use the computers to hopefully locate Necrom, you didn't have Captain Britain realize that he is unable to fit through the usual doorways like he did before he left for Otherworld. And he believed that when it came to TechNet, when they did some, repairs around the lighthouse, they most likely made the place a tad bit too small for him to walk through the actual doorways. But you have Kitty and Nightcrawler believe it could be something else, especially when he tries to use the computer to find Necrom. He destroys the entire keyboard. And so to Kitty and Nightcrawler, they are wondering if Lady Roma had removed the jinx that she had placed on him as a way to make sure that he would always be near Excalibur. Because remember that Lady Roma and Merlin went out of their way to form Excalibur, setting up different things to make sure those heroes came together. But you have Nightcrawler wondering if they're still being used in some kind of way by Merlin and also Lady Roma. Now, the other half of the team went into the kitchen to, make a snack for everybody, except when they get into the kitchen, they are then teleported into another reality, to another kitchen in a different reality, where they're being confronted by a very weird creature. Now, when it comes to Sarai, she freaks out because she has no idea what is going on, and so she tries to blast the creature, but when she does use her powers, our hero then teleported back into their own reality and destroyed their own kitchen. Now, the team who are upstairs trying to use the computer to find Necrom, they hear the explosion and go downstairs. But the problem is that team, most of the heroes came down except for Nightcrawler, because Nightcrawler, he was teleported into another reality. Now, in this reality, at first, it's Nightcrawler believing it's his own, but possibly the far future. And the reason why, because he finds the dead body of Megan and his own dead body as well. The dead bodies have been there for a very long time. But either way, he realized that this is not his reality or the future of his reality, that this is another reality. Either way, you have Nightcrawler being able to teleport back into his own reality. Now, once he's able to get back to his own reality, the main Marvel universe, he tells the rest of the team that they should probably fight Necrom on the outside of the lighthouse, because right now they have seen too many things happen in a very short period of time while being at the lighthouse. And if they want to make sure they defeat Necrom, they need a better battlefield, better than the lighthouse at the moment. But once you have our heroes being able to regroup down the cave of the lighthouse, they then see more and more phantoms. Now, the phantoms are basically people who are appearing left and right from different realities, but then also disappear left and right as soon as they do appear. Now, for our heroes, they believe it has to be Widget, because he does have the ability to open up portals to allow people to travel into other realities. But you didn't have our heroes realize that maybe it's not Widget. But then you have Rachel Summers be confronted by Necrom, who now holds on to the power of the Anti-Phoenix. And you have Necrom say, no, it's him doing all of this. See, what he's doing right now is trying to merge all different realities into one. And if that happens, well, as we all know, all realities are going to be destroyed. But he does tell Rachel that if she wants to save her reality, this Earth reality, she must hand over the power of the Phoenix. The other realities, they'll all die. But this one right here will survive if she hands over the power of the Phoenix. But now we jump over to Lady Roma and Saturnine. Now, these two ladies are technically the guardians of the Omniverse, the entire multiverse of Marvel Comics. But the problem is they realize that something big is happening on the main Marvel universe, but other realities are now collapsing into one another, and that is a huge problem. But that's not the big thing about the ending of this chapter. The big surprise is that Merlin appears. Now, Merlin is the father to Lady Roma, and the thing was, he died, but apparently he's alive again. He says, listen, I came back from the dead to see my final move finally be made for this big game I started many years ago. And so as we dive into Excalibur issue number 50, we do see Necron continuing to kind of make threats towards Rachel Summers to tell her to go ahead and hand over the power of the Phoenix over to him. Now, of course, she's not going to do that at all. And really, we kind of find out that this is not Necron really here, that this is just a mental image that he has sent over to kind of torture the mind of Rachel Summers. Either way, you do have Kai Lun being able to get rid of the actual image of Necron. Now, after doing that, you have Ferran say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and fight Necron by myself. Now, of course, you have the other members of Excalibur telling him that is a bad idea because he almost lost to Anti-Phoenix. There's no way that he would be able to take down Necron with the power of the Anti-Phoenix with his own. And so you have Ferran not listening, and he just walks away. Now, for our heroes, they do realize that this can't not be Necron, who's right now combining all these different realities together, causing all these time problems at the moment, that these things were happening before he had appeared, which honestly, that is correct, because remember, in the early days of Excalibur, our heroes would just walk around their lighthouse and sometimes walk into another reality. And so you did have our heroes realize it has to be Rachel Summers. She's the reason why time is being messed with. Because remember, Rachel comes from the future. She came back in past, or to the past, sorry, to hopefully change her future. But of course, she could not do that. And so this Kitty Pryde saying, no, Rachel has the ability to manipulate time. It's her. She's the reason why time is all strange at the moment. But getting over to Ferran, he does go confront Necron, who had arrived at the lighthouse. Now, like we saw earlier, the kid cannot take down anybody at all by himself, but he is very confident in himself, believing that he can actually take down Necron. Now, you have Kai Lun try to help out as well, but of course, Kai Lun cannot do much either. Now, like I said earlier at the very beginning of this video, where we saw Necron take out F56, I did say Micromax, a mutant who works for F56, survived, and so he does reappear to help out Excalibur to take down Necron. But of course, Necron is just too powerful for our heroes to actually take down on their own, without the help of the rest of the Excalibur team. Now, this is the point where we see Alan Davis begin to wrap up the first story arc on his run on Excalibur. You see, you do have the main team of Excalibur inside the lighthouse. Now, you have Megan change into her true form. Now, while in this true form, she now has the ability to see life energy. And we had talked about life energy in our last video, but she didn't realize that all the life energy is going towards Brian, kind of explaining why he's currently growing in size. Now, let's not forget that Lady Roma and also Merlin had basically did different things to make sure that Excalibur would come together. And here is the reason why. Because Nightcrawler realized if they are able to merge into one body, of course Captain Britain, then most likely they can stop the convergence of all realities coming together. But on top of that, they might have a way to actually stop Necron as well. And so you have all our heroes go into Captain Britain, and then they disappear to hopefully stop Necron and the convergence as well. Now, I want to jump back over to Merlin, Lady Roma, and also Saturnine, because this is where we learn everything that's going on when it comes to Merlin and also Necron as well. So you have Merlin tell us that many years ago, he had did a gambit extending back to when he was actually a student of magic, a student to Necrom. The original Pharaon was also a student of Necrom as well, and it was Necrom who discovered the energy matrix. Now, we had talked about the energy matrix before. It's basically the source of the power of all Captain Britons in all realities across Marvel's multiverse. But while doing that, he also discovered the doorways in Otherworld as well that leads into other dimensions. Now remember, when it comes to Otherworld, it does have access to all realities across Marvel's multiverse. On the moment that you had all the realities aligned, you had Pharaon tell the Phoenix to project the tower across time, which would later become Excalibur's lighthouse in all different realities. At that moment, Necrom also attacked Pharaon, attempting to collapse all realities into one, and then absorb the energy, which would make him very powerful. But Pharaon had the Phoenix Force on his side and fought off Necrom while Merlin had leapt into the Matrix. Instead of killing Pharaon, Necrom ripped the Phoenix Force from him and left him powerless. He released part of the Phoenix Force, but used the rest along with some life energy to create the Anti-Phoenix before Necrom went into the multiverse to prepare, while Pharaon spent the rest of his life awaiting the Anti-Phoenix before putting his power into the earth. Merlin had harnessed the Matrix and used its power to create the Otherworld, and found Captain Britain Corps to police the multiverse and aid in the hunt for Necrom. And so that was his plan this entire time, to wait for the right moment to finally bring down Necrom. Now I want to jump back over to Kai Lun, and the reason why, because in our last couple of videos we had talked about the idea that Kai Lun was stuck in another reality for many years, but while being there he fell in love with a princess known as Satnine. The problem was Satnine died by the hands of Necrom, and Kai Lun sees her in this reality, but it's not really her. It's kind of like just a copy of her that Kai Lun seeing at the moment that Necrom is using against him. Now Kai Lun also realized that Necrom is a tad bit weak at the moment because the battle is taking a toll on him. Either way, you have Necrom realize that Excalibur had basically went into the multiverse to stop the convergence. And so you have Necrom leave the lighthouse to hopefully stop Excalibur. Now, I want to skip over a few parts to get into the actual battle between Rachel Summers and also Necrom. Now, this battle does go back and forth for a while, but let's not forget that when it came to Rachel earlier on in the story arc, she had decided to not use the powers of the Phoenix. And the reason why, because she was beginning to regain her memories of her past life from the Days of Future Past timeline. But now she realized she has no choice but to use the powers of the Phoenix as the way to take down Necrom. Now, these two characters, they travel across the universe. They go over to a dead planet and they do battle on that planet. But these two characters, they're going to go back and forth for a while. But you didn't have Rachel being able to actually take down Necrom once and for all. By using the full power of the Phoenix, she was able to get rid of Necrom to save the day. Now, after the battle, you do have Rachel Summers reappear. Now, when she does, she's wearing the outfit of the Phoenix. But our heroes have no idea why she's wearing the power of the Phoenix. Now, you have Merlin appear, and this is where you have Alan Davis begin to wrap up his first story arc, but kind of get us ready for his next story arc down the road. You see, once you have Merlin appear, he didn't tell our heroes that, well, he still has the power of the Matrix because it's right now hiding behind all the towers across all reality, including the one in Otherworld as well. Now, when it comes to Brian Braddock, he's still holding on to a lot of life energy. And so giving that life energy over to Megan, they were able to blast the tower in Otherworld, which of course then leads into all towers across the multiverse also being destroyed. And with that, Merlin now lost the power of the energy matrix, and he leaves upset at Excalibur. Now, with the lighthouse now being gone in the main Marvel universe, you now have our heroes move over to Brian Braddock's manor because the Braddock family had a lot of money, and so he had a nice house they all can move into for the time being. But we're kind of left to wonder if Excalibur is still being controlled by someone behind the scenes. And if they are, who? But what is next for our heroes? But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.